If we haven't met before, I am Dr. Michelle Quirk. I am a pediatrician and a run coach and the founder of Mindful Marathon, where I help make running easy and fun for busy professionals.
And I love Dr. Quirk. So we are going to delight you with some discussions about running. And I love that she helps people on their running journey because it's definitely been a huge piece of my life. So thank you
Yeah.
for having this wonderful discussion today.
Yeah, and thank you for being here to share your perspective, which I find very valuable. So tell everybody, give us a little update. You embarked on a challenge for 2023, and we have been in contact about that, but tell us about the challenge and give us the update.
Yeah, well, I want to give people a little bit about the backstory because as we're going to talk about some considerations when it comes to doing running challenges and who we would recommend questioning your reason for doing it is I do come from a long history of compulsive running where I ran no matter how my body was reacting to it. And it was more of a self-punishment. And so over the past about 2 years now, I have repaired my relationship with running and it's been a very self-compassionate, mindful movement, which goes along well with your running coaching. And I have now embarked, after I felt that was in a good place with running, on a challenge to run 2023 miles in 2023. So it's a run the year challenge. So if I don't hit it, then I have to run 2024 next year. And I am running for cancer patient care. So all of my fundraisers go to MD Anderson and it's routed so that it goes to patient care.
All right. I love the mission. I love the challenge. That challenge makes me sweat a little bit. And I'm glad that perhaps I did not sign up for this challenge, but
Yep.
tell us, well, how is this different, would you say, from training for a race, for example?
I think for a race, it's kind of a shorter training interval. This one's like a long training interval for me, being the whole year. I've never tracked my training for a whole year. And what that changes in a mindset is that you have to make sure that you're healthy for a whole year. And so it's making me more conservative on the day to day so that I know I can make it hopefully to the end of the year. And also, I think when I think about training, such as the marathon, I want to hit those big mileages to make sure I can run 26.2 miles. But when it comes to 2023 miles, in order to make sure I can hit that, I actually have to structure it in a way that I'm not doing those super long runs so that I can maintain my longevity and daily runs. Because as we talked a little bit about before we jumped on, is that it's hard when you're running almost every day and that cumulative effect of that running really gets to you. So I think there's some few adjustments in the mind. And then of course, how you approach the training.
Are you, in a week, are you deliberately taking like certain days for rest, or are you trying to hit a certain mileage for the week? Like, how are you thinking about training as a whole?
Yeah. So before I signed up for the challenge, I made sure I calculated the numbers of what does this look like on a daily basis. And then making sure that I could structure some time for rest. Does it look like on a weekly basis so that I can factor that in? Because if I only looked at it on a daily basis, then I would feel very obsessed about making sure I hit that on every day. But structuring it into that, okay, what does it look like for a week? And then if I don't hit it for the week, okay, what does this look like for a month? And then that can give myself some more flexibilities. Like I can make this up next week. And so I think usually keeping in my mind what it would look like in the month, and then I'll look on my status tracker to see how far off I'm at or if I'm on target.
Yeah. I mean, what I hear you say is the flexibility. I like that you are viewing it that way. We had a chat beforehand about, the idea of a run streak and kind of getting in that mindset. I've never done that before, and I've never done like a mileage challenge either. but
Yeah.
but I get nervous about a run streak because sometimes, I mean, I know how I feel on the day to day, and some weeks are just busier than others. The body feels tired and it doesn't allow for rest maybe as much as I would like. So I like that you're planning rest in there. and being
Yeah.
flexible with yourself.
That's such an important conversation too, because coming from exercise addiction, I know what I gave up in order to go to the gym. And I know the obsessions I had and how much it interfered with my ability to be with people. And I was so obsessive. So that's why I've never actually tracked my year. And now I track it on my phone, but I don't go back. I don't stare at it. And I just kind of click it, put in the numbers, and then I'll look to see if I'm on track, but not every day, like maybe once in a while, which is a huge win for me.
That's
But when I
great.
was, yeah, when I was in that state of exercise compulsion, I would turn down invites for everything. And that's what I think people are putting themselves at risk for when they commit to a running streak and they get obsessed about making sure that they do it. Well, what's the cost? Not only to your body, but how does that mental anxiety, like I have to hit it, and how does that interfere with your ability to be present? And what are you saying no to when you're saying yes to this win streak, run
Yeah.
streak, win streak? It's a run streak.
Yeah, no, I hear all that. I mean, when we first hopped on here and you asked how I was, and I thought, well, I spent the morning running and did my long run. And that was half of my Sunday.
Yep.
And I love it, but it is, it's part of a training cycle. So it's not like this every Sunday. But
Yeah.
but it does, it takes up a lot of time.
Yeah. And I think that's so true when it comes to marathoning.
Hmm.
Just it takes up a lot, and learning
Hmm.
how you can balance your life and making sure. So one thing with the running and not having had a good relationship with fueling myself, that's another thing that's changed with this challenge, because I want to make it the whole year. So I'm like, what do I
Yeah.
need to do today to make sure that I feel healthy? And I don't have a great intuitive relationship with food. So I can tell by how hard the run is, or if you get that mental overtraining feeling where you just feel so burnt out and I don't want to go run. Well, for me, that's a sign I've probably underfueled and overtrained. And that makes me really irritable. And so if you're thinking a running streak where you're not really tuned in to what you're doing, or you're committed to a marathon and you have the long runs and you know how it makes you feel, I think it's so important to check in with yourself and to notice the flags that come up for you personally and what that could mean.
Yeah. I think back to training for the first marathon I did, and I was very rigid about that training. Like if I had a lot of I guess I would say all or none thinking. Like if I miss even this easy run in the middle of the week, then I'm never going to be able to run the marathon. Like
Mhm.
I really, part of me believed that. And now, I mean, that was quite a number of years ago, but I think I have become more flexible. And also I think this comes with experience with running too. You were saying like those signs of overtraining and fatigue and all these things. I mean, yes, there are flags in the rest of your life, but even how you feel, if the run is supposed to feel easy and it's not feeling easy, or you're 1 mile in and things are not looking too good, like it's okay to cut that short. And the me who was training for that first marathon would have called that a fail. Like if I had to cut something short or skip a day, rest a day, get more sleep. So it definitely comes with some experience, but I think, yeah, I don't know, maybe after being at this sport for a while, we learn to be more flexible with ourselves.
Yeah. And during residency in surgery, I compromised my sleep to run,
Hmm.
and it led to severe consequences. So when
Hmm.
we are compromising, I know Runner's World was good about putting this into their magazine, was about making sure you're not sacrificing sleep, and talks about the Olympians that run, they sleep a whole lot. So
Yeah.
important to prioritize that. And if we think about people that are high performance, well, they may have the ability, that might be what they focus on in their priority in life. And if you're balancing the cumulative stress of daily life plus you're running
Mhm.
and then not sleeping, I just remember those days, and it was totally not in
Yeah.
it at all, like mentally, and had some severe compromise in all aspects of my life. So is it always evaluating what are the pros and what are the cons?
Yeah. Yeah. I like to tell people, we're most of us anyway, are not professional runners,
Mhm.
and we're not, running is not happening in a vacuum. Like we have lives and jobs and families and social lives.
Yeah.
It's just one part of the whole, and it's not our job to run, which is a good thing about it too.
Yeah. And this came up actually the first month I was doing this challenge. As you know, I took a year off of long distance running to repair my relationship with it. And mentally, I've trained for 5 marathons. Like I can run, and mentally could run a lot, but my
Mhm.
body it's not there yet. And so trying to get myself reintegrated with where's my body at versus my mind that sees. So the first month I was running a little bit too much and then my hip got out of alignment. So former self probably would have tried to run through that. But I have
Mhm.
learned through experience, as you said, that when I run through that with a hip out of alignment, then your knee starts to hurt, then your other leg starts to hurt, and then you compromise the longevity of your career, running career, whether it's a running streak or running challenge or the rest of your life.
Mhm.
And so when I was thinking like, oh my gosh, my hip, it's an injury I've had before and it's so painful. I know we've shared some similar pains with the hips. What is with
Yes.
his hips?
I don't know. Yeah, it's a work in progress.
Yeah, but I was too tight. I wasn't stretching enough. Like I
Yeah.
knew I don't stretch enough. And that's one thing that's starting to change with the challenge is like, I know I have to stretch more because I'm so tight and it's increasing my injury risk and it's making me feel awful. And, and so the good thing is when my hip went out of alignment, I did step it back a whole lot. And I said, if at the end of this run, I feel worse, I'm going to have to go straight to the doctor. And fortunately I got through that and went to the doctor and got back on track, and I'm not behind on the challenge. But it's so interesting because I had to trust that I could get back on track and that if I didn't, I was still doing the best thing for me.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's so important. And I would agree with this too, that I've had a couple of injuries and I'm sure that I ran through things that I shouldn't have, or like it was just, just something starting to bother me, but I thought it wasn't that big of a deal and kept running on it. And now I'm very, I'll put the brakes on a lot more quickly and like try to sort that out before we keep going. Take more for me, like maybe a more gradual ramp up in training or like extra step down weeks. So I'll just make myself have a longer training cycle for a particular race than maybe some other people, but that's what works. So we're
Yeah.
we're sticking with it.
Yeah. I have a question for you because I know
Yeah.
people hear this, you're a running coach and sometimes people think they want to run. They're not sure they want to run or how do I get the motivation to run? And they could
Mm.
look at people talking about running that love running and they think, well, I don't belong there. But I want to hear from you. How many days do you feel that you wake up and you don't want to run? Then when you start running, it changes. Or what is it? What does your daily motivation look like?
Yeah, I'm not really a morning person, to be honest with you. Like I love sleep. I really do. And so sometimes when the alarm goes off, I mean, I am groaning, right? And I'm like, oh, I have to get up and go run. That's the thought.
Mhm.
Um, but I think the bigger picture, like I might press snooze once, but I do get out of bed and put my shoes on. And I think our friend Erin Wiseman always says like sometimes the hardest part is tying your shoes on, getting like putting your sneakers on. And I
Yeah.
think that is true. Like once I have my running clothes on and my sneakers on, I'm good. Like I can get out the door. But yeah, I usually have the thought, like this race isn't going to run itself.
Mm. Interesting. Or even the races can be so anxiety provoking, as you're saying, for the marathon. And it's like, that in those moments that the best thing you can do for your future self is to take that run.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
feel that?
yeah, definitely. And I also know how I'm going to feel after or even during. Like I love being out there. I love being on the trail. I love how I feel after I get back. So now it's definitely a positive feedback loop, but like in the moment when the alarm goes off, like I don't want to get up and get out of bed either, especially in the winter here. It's dark, it's cold.
Yeah.
I feel like I share that with other people. I don't know. I mean, how
Yeah.
about you? Do you wake up like, I can't wait to run? I don't know.
No, never. I
Okay.
don't think ever, actually. I don't, but
Okay.
I don't think ever. And I think this is valuable for people who haven't started running because that positive feedback loop might come a little bit later as
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
I felt like a new runner when I took off a year and I also have my former self to compare myself to, which I sometimes get stuck in doing, but I feel like a newer runner again and to allow your body to progress without having expectations or comparisonitis
Mhm.
And then you get to the point where running feels a little bit easier and you get the more mindfulness, but overcoming that first obstacle. So if somebody wants to run the obstacles, I've never run before, and there is that little bit of that learning curve to get to a point where you get the positive feedback loop. Like that to me is like I said, anytime someone's in that, I'm like, you got to go talk to Dr. Quirk because that's you need like having a partner, having a coach that can help you and they can help you. One, I think mechanics is really important. I see a lot of people that have a lot of energy expenditure from tensing too hard, putting their
Yeah,
shoulders up. And I'm like, oh, I can really
and
help you
running
make that a lot more efficient. If you want my help, I can see if I can help you make that more efficient. But that's why I wanted to put that in because if someone's questioning it and it hasn't gotten to that positive feedback loop, I'm just gonna say it's such a valuable thing to have a supportive coach that really understands and can cater to their personal needs.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that. And a lot of what we do is, I mean, we talk about all the obstacles, right? And they're different for everybody, but they're similar ones. I mean, time is like a huge one. And then also, like, how's it going to feel? Like, so many people are afraid it's going to hurt, it's not going to feel good. And we take in all of our past experience with running. And
Yeah.
I was no different. But a lot of times it's a little bit at a time, and trying to get into that kind of marathon mindset. Like, we're not trying to make an overnight, flip a switch and we're going to wake up and love running, but just a little bit at a time. And once you get consistent with it, I mean, I would say in my experience it takes a couple of weeks, maybe 2, 3, even 4 weeks. But after that time, like, if you really are consistent with it, it becomes much easier.
Yeah, and having that negative experience, say they try to race, and people want to say, I tried a marathon and marathon's really far distance. And where did
Yeah.
where that could be a goal in the future. And I ran so many half marathons and so many shorter distances so that you get to that state of you feel successful at a shorter distance.
Mhm.
And then having a 5K can help you with your kick at the end of a half marathon. Having that half marathon practice can help you. How am I going to fuel for the marathon? And having that success under your belt, therefore you can get at least through that 5K and the half marathon of your marathon, knowing you've already done that
Yep.
before jumping in and saying, I have to do a full marathon.
Mhm.
And I would
Mhm.
question like, why? Why do you have to do the full marathon? And what's the time urgency if we can get you there
Yeah.
in a more sustainable fashion? So of course you can speak more to that.
Yeah, I love celebrating all the wins, no matter how small that may seem. Like, a person who has struggled with consistency and then they do the 3 runs that they wanted to do for that week, like, that's a huge win. And it doesn't matter if those were 10 minutes or if they were 30 minutes, but we did it consistently for a week. Like, that's a huge win. But I love, yes, especially with a longer training cycle. So if you do have a half marathon on your calendar for, 6 months from now, I like to put other distances in there. Like, if you like races and you want to do them, maybe we start with, we sprinkle in a 5K, or we put a 10K, but you don't necessarily have to race the race. You can run it at maybe your half marathon pace. So we play with it based on someone's goals. And, if you like races, I have a lot of runners who sign up for a lot of races and they're like, help me organize this. I signed up
Mm,
for all the things.
yeah.
And if you race all of them, that could lead to overtraining, and that's a lot of cumulative fatigue. So we have to kind of figure out which ones are true race efforts versus, are we taking this one easy and for fun? Are we running with our mom? I've done lots of races for fun with my mom and with other friends. So yeah, it's all about someone's personal goals. But I also, in a training cycle, like to have different things on the calendar, because something that's 6 months, even 4 months away, seems like a while.
Hmm.
It just seems so far out. Like, oh, I'm running all of these long runs for something that's happening, so much further down the road. So
Yeah. And you can make sure you're
yeah.
hitting that checkpoint too. Because if we think it's so far down the road, I have the anxiety that I think I sign up for things 6 months, it feels great. But then as it gets closer, I'm like, what did I do? My past self did not have in mind my future self. And it's very consistent and repetitive that I do it a lot. And I haven't yet learned to stop signing myself up for things when I feel great, when I can foresee where that would go. But when it comes to running, if you sign up for something you're really excited about, you're exactly the right thing is like, if I can do something midway, and then that at least sets me up for success. And I'm not saying, and you, I know that you've had experience where people will sign up for something and then they don't train. It's so far away, they could compromise your training if the mindset isn't that you have to start, in a certain time frame away from the race.
Yeah, yeah. I think maybe one other thing, I was thinking about myself waking up in the morning and not wanting to run sometimes. The other thing is procrastination. I
Mhm.
find this in myself, and some of my runners may relate to this too, but especially on a weekend when I have a long run on the schedule, like I will get up and have a cup of coffee and kind of like procrastinate getting out the door.
Mhm.
Do
Yeah.
you do that?
Yeah. For the longer runs, because you're going to be out there for a while. And
Yes.
so I train all these 2023 miles will probably all of them, if maybe minus 13 or something, will be on the treadmill.
Oh,
And
wow. Okay.
so that has helped me reduce my procrastination, because with running, we know we get some GI distress, we have to pee, we're afraid, and it's really hard to time with your nourishment and your peeing and everything. So I found that you can go to the treadmill, it's close, and I can stop when I need to. That has reduced the amount of procrastination that I have. And I use the mindset that you just mentioned about that positive reinforcement. I think about, like, how much more productive am I going to be if I do this now
Mhm,
versus,
mhm.
I know, so I work remotely, and after I've sat for a long period of time and your legs start to get a little bit inflamed, a little bit of edematous, I'm like, it's going to be harder and I'm going to be restless and I'm going to be thinking about it. So why don't I just go do it now?
Yeah. Oh, I like that. I may use that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think I do think of a reward. Like usually mine is like, oh, I will make myself like a nice chai tea. Like it takes a little bit more work to make than just boiling the water. But like when I get back, I know it's been so cold here. Spring is not here yet. So
Yeah.
that's what I did today.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah. And for people that haven't met you or know exactly what type of coach you are, can you explain who you coach?
Yeah, yeah. So I coach, I would like to say, beginner runners, or maybe runners who haven't run in a while. Maybe you had a prior relationship with running and you haven't been out there in quite a while. Those are my people. And, first time half marathoners, marathoners, maybe you were a runner in high school or college, like a shorter distance runner, but would like to run a marathon. So yeah, those are my people.
Yeah. And we talked about this before about how much running is a mental sport. And I wish, if I could go back to, I ran in college. If I could go back to college, I would have got a coach for what you can help with, is that mindset,
Yeah.
because I held myself back and I sabotaged all of my races, I think, because I
Mm.
had no self-confidence.
Yeah.
And so that's why I want people that are in that same, I know I'm not alone, so I'm saying this, like,
Yeah.
you're in that same boat, you are getting in your own way, and you just have that inkling that, like, what if I try it? Because I did not start as a runner. I saw my brother running around. We've talked about this a little bit before, but I started as a shot putter, and
Yeah.
I was very insecure about running and was very uncomfortable in my body. And so when I saw my brother running, I was jealous, and I saw him getting my dad's approval. So I told my dad, I think I'm going to sign up for track. And my dad was his eye was so delighted. I was like, oh, now I got to do track. And I was so uncomfortable being there. I had such performance anxiety that I didn't go to practice. And my punishment was the mile. And,
Oh.
and so then I ran the mile. I'm like, that wasn't too bad, actually. I don't mind the mile. And then as I was practicing for the mile, I got lost. And so then I became a long distance runner. But but just like for people that are like, I can't relate. So I want just people to know. So we can get so passionate about running. And then it's kind
Yeah.
of like having teachers that talk at like, okay, how were you at the beginning though? And so
Yeah.
we can help if you can see yourself in those comments, like definitely
Yeah.
lean into that and join the running community, because it's one of the most supportive communities that I've ever experienced in my life.
Yeah. And I wasn't a runner growing up, and that held me back for a long time when I finally found my way into the sport, because I would find myself like at the start lines of these races thinking I don't belong here. Like I'm not a runner. I'm not very fast. Like I just, I mean, that was going on for quite a number of years, even, after, at what point do you say that you're a runner? Like, is there a certain distance or like time on your feet that you have to run? I don't know. Like I was standing at the start line of the marathon thinking I don't belong here, but that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And it's either I don't belong here or I paid to do this.
Yeah.
But one thing I would also offer in that mindset, if like that probably can explain if we dive into the core of like, how does that show up in different parts of my life?
Mm,
And when I was using running, and some consistent themes I've had with people that had compulsive running, is we were taking it on ourselves. Our self-worth was so low. And so when people are leaning into any sort of movement, exercise, or anything, is asking what's at the core. So we say, what's at the why? But then when I shifted from compulsive running to mindful running,
mhm.
I went from zero self-compassion to a lot of self-compassion. I went from punishing my body to moving and working with my body. I went from completely disassociated. I had no connection to my body. I couldn't tell you hunger cues, couldn't tell you if I was injured. I can remember it, but I was so disconnected. So if you need trauma informed therapy, or what you need before you jump into something that's like, I'm going to run a marathon because I think it's going to give me the sense of worth that I'm lacking. And then you get injured along the way and then you spiral. Like, I say this because I've experienced it. And
Yeah.
so I just want people to be honest with themselves, and then honest, of course, with a coach like you that can really tease apart their core why.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of my, new athlete questionnaire, any program that I've ever put together. One of the questions on there is, what is your why? And sometimes the first answer that comes to mind may not quite be exactly it. And that's, a conversation for us to have at a at another time. But yeah, really thinking about your why, and why you want to do this. So
Yeah.
um
What has running given you?
mm, I think at the beginning, running was my way out of burnout in medicine. And I would not have known that. Like I can see that now,
Yeah.
looking back on it. Um, I think the community, like so many friendships, and a lot of self-confidence that I have brought into other parts of life,
Mm.
like that wasn't there before. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you?
Uh, I think running, it allowed me to think more clearly.
Mm,
Because if we get stuck, our bodies, I've been reading a lot of people that talk about anxiety and movement and how to dissipate. Like, anxiety is natural, it's normal, and we pathologize it a lot. And it could be pathological if it gets in the way. But when it comes to having nervous energy, like, I could think so much more clearly. Everything I've written while I was running.
mm,
And I needed, coming from situations where I didn't feel safe, running
yeah.
was the time I felt safe. And
Mm,
so that's what allowed me to keep running, is because that's when I always felt safe. So until I turned on myself, but in the beginning stages, I wasn't so mean about running to myself, but I felt that safety and that I could be in tune with myself. Um, but yeah, it's interesting how it can turn on you if you're not careful, but then you can bring it back, of course.
yeah. I think in more recent years, I really would say it's made me a much calmer person. I mean, I've been doing other work with meditation too, like outside of that. So I think it's like a combination of things, but yeah, I definitely feel more balanced and centered if it's a day when I run versus a day that I don't run. But I'm still okay taking rest days. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And I think one thing about the challenging relationship with running is how society talks about exercise. So I was born in the 80s, and throughout my life and throughout our lives, it's diet culture. And
Yeah.
so I had a hard time understanding that people that run don't all have eating disorders. Like, really hard time conceptualizing that you can have a healthy relationship with running. And so leaning into that belief and that challenge of my own brain has helped me to heal it that much further, and then help offer to people. Like, there are so many states in my mind where I had to earn food through running.
Mm,
And And I just want to offer people, like, if you're catching yourself in that trap, please get the support, because it's a never ending cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so Tony and I, my husband Tony and I, we're in the middle of a sports nutrition class that we're both taking. And I really I'm leaning into the fueling aspect, like for these long runs, a lot more than I have before. Like I understand the science and all of that, but I can't say that I paid a ton of attention to this, like in the past for myself. And the performance has been so far like so much better, just like
Wow.
how I feel at the end of a long run, or after a week of some higher mileage and things. So I mean, I can't, after this training cycle is over, maybe we can debrief about that. But
Yeah.
I do think it's making a difference, and I would not have I didn't think it would make this big of a difference. How about that?
That's amazing. And I think it's so true. And we had a little bit of comments together in the past about how I've underestimated how much fuel a runner needs consistently. And we do it, right? Especially when we're in the society that we're in. It's hard to believe, when I had somebody that helped me to fuel properly, I never would have gotten myself there. And I was like, it was dumbfounding to me. I was like, I cannot believe this. But to your point, the positive reinforcement was how much better I could think, how much better I could feel, how much. So when you're under fueling, you can get irritable and a lot more anxiety. Of course, if you're over caffeinated, like I am most of the time, that might also impact your anxiety levels. But that's what I noticed when I was feeling myself appropriately compared to not, is anxiety levels throughout the day are so much lower if I fuel myself properly. And it sounds so simple, but if you're in that diet trap or eating trap or whatever, you'll know what I'm talking about. So
Yeah. Maybe that's our next conversation. We can talk about that.
Yeah. And on a lasting note about, so eating disorders can show up as like a way to control anxiety. And as I just stated, it perpetuates the anxiety. So definitely could be something we discuss further and support anybody who needs to navigate keeping themselves healthy and running with joy.
Yeah.
And mindfully. But stick around, make sure you subscribe to both of our channels. So your channel, in case
Mindful Marathon. Yes.
Mindful Marathon. So subscribe to Mindful Marathon, subscribe to A Life True to You, and stick around. You can find my email there. But the community of YouTube is one that I hope people feel very much supported on both of our channels, and to have these discussions even further. It's so much fun to interact in the chat, in the comments on YouTube. So let us know you're there.
Yeah. And I always love chatting with you. I always learn something.
For better or for worse, there's Adam Grant, the Think Again. So we have permission that if our thoughts change, that we are just leaning into what he teaches, is that you then rethink and will help support people in the additional lessons we learn along the way.
I love
But
it.
I always love chatting with you as well, of course.
Well, thank you for doing this. Thank you for taking some time on your Sunday.
Likewise, after your long run, so for people, usually when I was training for my half marathon, I hadn't run a long distance for a long time. And I realized I was so crabby after my long runs because you're so tired. So I am really appreciating how you showed up. You were so kind and compassionate, and not the grumpy type of mood that I was in a few times when I hopped on calls after my long runs.
Well, I'll tell you, it's for me, it's not grumpiness, it's usually fatigue. And I could like go on the couch and take a nap, but it's better. It's better now, getting more rest and leaning into the fuel. I will say that. So
love it. It's awesome. I can't wait to hear. And when are we checking back in on how this fuel is going?
Well, I think maybe after the half marathon.
All right.
Yeah, that's the end of April. So
awesome.
We'll see.
Sounds good. Can't wait.
Stay tuned. All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.